If you like what you see, if I can please request you to subscribe to my channel. So what is a reserve currency? A foreign currency held by a central bank or a treasury as a formal part of its reserves is known as a reserve currency. Countries hold reserves for several reasons. Some common ones include to weather economic shocks, to pay for imports, to service and pay down debt, and for moderation of their own currency values. The International Monetary Fund recognizes 8 major reserve currencies, namely the sterling pound, the Australian dollar, the Canadian dollar, the euro, the Japanese yen, the Chinese renminbi, the Swiss franc, and finally the US dollar. The US dollar is considered the king and has a market share of 59%. But what about the Eurozone? Europe has a sizable economy. The Eurozone accounts for a large amount of the world's trade. The euro is freely convertible, which means it can be traded with little to no restrictions. The Eurozone has a history of sound macroeconomic principles. But then why is the euro not the market leader? Well, the real differentiator is the fact that the US has the world's largest and most liquid treasury market. US treasuries are government debt securities issued by the US federal government. I would argue it's not the US dollar, but in fact it's US treasuries, which are really the world's reserve asset. So what's the future of the US dollar? And what is this exorbitant privilege? While the dollar is the reserve currency, we have a global financial order that is dictated by American values. The US government, economy, and citizenry benefit tremendously from the hegemony of the dollar. The strong demand for US dollars, treasury bonds, allows the US to borrow at much lower interest rates. The value of debt does not change with foreign exchange fluctuations. With all this, the US government has the power to impose sanctions, which is a very useful foreign policy tool. The dollar has stood strong for 7 decades, and it's the missteps of the US that could potentially lead to its demise. The US has acquired a huge amount of debt to the extent of $32 trillion. The US also needs to think about the way it's using sanctions and make sure they are used in the most judicious manner. Emerging powers have been trying to prevent the US dollar's dominance in international trade. China has been trying to forge agreements with Brazil and Argentina where it can use its own currency. So my question for the day is, what is BRICS currency? Is this a feasible idea to counter the US dollar?